When we talk about putting God first, it's not about living in a way that looks perfect from the outside. It's about choosing what truly anchors us on the inside. We live in a world that constantly tells us that hustle is the answer, that achievement is the cure, that control will keep us safe. And yet, so often, we arrive at success and still feel empty, restless, or disconnected. Putting God first is about surrendering the illusion that we can do it all on our own. It's about admitting that we're human, brave, messy, flawed, and still deeply worthy of love. And when we start from that place, when our first instinct is to align with something greater than ourselves, everything shifts. Our courage feels less like a performance and more like truth. Our vulnerability doesn't weaken us, it makes us stronger, and our choices stop being about survival and start being about impact. This isn't about rules or rituals. It's about relationship. It's about asking ourselves, in the quiet moments, what matters most? Who am I serving with this choice, this action, this dream? And when the answer begins with God, we don't just build a life that looks successful. We build one that feels whole. When we think of strength, most of us picture someone standing tall, unshakable, fully in control. We admire the ones who seem to have everything together, who never let life rattle them, who power through challenges with grit and determination. That's the image the world sells us. That strength is about control, about holding everything in place, about keeping the wheel steady no matter how rough the storm gets. But when we really pay attention to our own lives, when we get honest about the moments that have shaped us, we realize something very different. The greatest strength we've ever experienced didn't come from control at all. It came from surrender. Surrender doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean giving up. It means loosening the grip we keep on the illusion that we can handle everything on our own. Because the truth is, we weren't designed to carry every burden by ourselves. There's a point where our own striving, our own pushing, our own effort simply isn't enough. And that's not failure. That's humanity. It's in those moments when our strength runs out, that putting God first becomes not just an idea, but a lifeline. Think about the times you've tried to force something into place. Maybe it was a relationship, a job, a dream that didn't unfold the way you thought it should. You tightened your grip, you planned every detail, you worked harder than ever, and still, things refused to move the way you wanted them to. That frustration, that exhaustion, it's the cost of trying to live as if you're the only one in control. And yet, when we shift, when we surrender, when we finally whisper, God, I can't do this alone, something powerful happens. The weight doesn't vanish, but it feels lighter. The chaos doesn't disappear, but it stops consuming us. We find a strength we didn't even know we had because it's no longer ours alone. Putting God first is an act of courage. It's saying, I don't have to pretend to be invincible. I don't have to keep holding everything together with white-knuckled hands. I can let go and trust that there's a bigger plan at work here. That's not the kind of strength the world celebrates, but it's the kind of strength that actually sustains us. It gives us resilience, not just for the victories, but for the disappointments. It gives us peace, not just when life is smooth, but in the middle of the storm. And what's beautiful about surrender is that it doesn't shrink us. It frees us. It allows us to show up more authentically, to risk more boldly, to love more fully, because we're no longer relying only on our limited capacity. We are connected to a source of strength that never runs dry. That's the paradox. We so often overlook. The moment we stop trying to control everything is the moment we become truly strong. We live in a culture that glorifies success. From the time we're young, we're told to chase achievement, to set big goals, to climb ladders, and to never stop striving. And when we finally get there, when we land the job, buy the house, build the business, or reach that milestone we've been dreaming of, it's supposed to feel like everything falls into place. But here's the truth many people don't talk about. Reaching success without a deeper sense of grounding can feel surprisingly empty. It's like running a marathon only to realize the finish line wasn't where you thought it would be. That emptiness comes from the fact that external achievements were never meant to be the whole story. They're temporary, they're fragile, and they're always shifting. You can be on top of the world one moment and back at the bottom the next. Without something larger to anchor you, success becomes a moving target that never really satisfies. You get the promotion, and then you immediately start wondering what's next. You finally achieve the dream, and then you feel restless, as if it still isn't enough. And in those quiet moments, when the applause has faded and the noise has settled, you're left asking yourself, why don't I feel whole? That's where putting God first changes everything. Spiritual grounding isn't about rejecting ambition or walking away from achievement. It's about making sure those achievements don't define your worth. When God is the foundation, success stops being the destination and becomes an expression of purpose. Your wins aren't just about personal gain. They're about impact. They're about using what you've been given to serve, to create, to lift others up. And suddenly that emptiness begins to fade because your life is no longer built only on what you've accomplished. It's built on who you're becoming and who you're serving. I think so many of us confuse success with fulfillment, but they're not the same thing. Success is about outcomes. Fulfillment is about alignment. Success says, look at what I've achieved. Fulfillment says, look at how I'm living. Success is loud, but fulfillment is steady. And when success is grounded in faith, the two can work together. You can celebrate the victories without being defined by them. You can endure the setbacks without being destroyed by them. Because your sense of worth, your sense of peace, doesn't rise and fall with the circumstances. It rests in something unshakable. It's not that success loses its meaning. It actually gains a deeper one. When God is at the center, every step forward, every opportunity, every breakthrough becomes part of a bigger story. And that's why people who live this way often seem to radiate a kind of quiet strength. They don't chase success for validation. They walk in purpose. They don't burn out trying to prove themselves. They move with intention. That's the difference spiritual grounding makes. It fills the emptiness with meaning. It turns achievement into service. And it transforms success from a finish line into a pathway of impact. Life has a way of throwing us into chaos when we least expect it. One moment everything feels steady, and the next it's as if the ground beneath us has shifted. Plans unravel, relationships change, opportunities vanish, and suddenly we're left scrambling for direction. Chaos doesn't ask for permission, it just shows up. And when it does, it blurs everything. The lines we thought were clear become confusing. The goals we thought mattered seem uncertain, and even our own strength starts to feel shaky. In those moments, it's easy to get lost in the noise, to chase quick fixes, or to try to control what can't be controlled. But here's the truth, clarity rarely comes from pushing harder into the chaos. Clarity comes from stepping back and choosing faith first. Faith has this way of cutting through the noise like nothing else can. It doesn't always give us immediate answers, but it gives us a lens through which to see more clearly. It reminds us that even in the storm, there is direction. Even in the mess, there is meaning. And even when everything feels uncertain, there is a foundation that doesn't move. That's what happens when we put God first. The chaos may not disappear, but we see it differently. Instead of drowning in confusion, we start to recognize where to place our trust, where to put our energy, and what truly matters in the moment. Think about the times in your life when everything felt like it was spinning out of control. Maybe you were caught in a season of loss, or faced with decisions that felt overwhelming, or simply weighed down by the pace of everything around you. In those times, logic and strategy could only take you so far. What you needed most wasn't more information, it was clarity. And clarity doesn't come from panic, it comes from pausing long enough to remember where your true north lies. That's the gift of faith. It reorients us when the world tilts sideways. Prioritizing faith doesn't mean you ignore the reality of the storm. It doesn't mean you deny the struggle. What it means is that you anchor yourself in something stronger than the storm. You choose to trust that even if you can't see the whole picture, God can. And from that trust comes a sense of peace that begins to clear the fog. Suddenly, decisions feel less paralyzing. Direction feels more possible. The chaos may still roar around you, but it no longer has the power to control you. There's something incredibly grounding about starting with faith in moments of uncertainty. It slows us down when everything else is speeding up. It reminds us that we don't need to have all the answers to take the next step. It keeps us from chasing every distraction or clinging to every fear. Faith doesn't silence the chaos, but it gives us the clarity to walk through it with steadiness. And that clarity makes all the difference. It transforms confusion into purpose, fear into courage, and chaos into an opportunity to lean on something greater than ourselves. Here's the expanded version of Keynote 40. Courage and vulnerability grow deeper when guided by divine purpose. Written as a natural, flowing speech of about 550 words, we often think of courage as charging forward without hesitation, and we imagine vulnerability as something fragile, something we should avoid showing if we want to be strong. But in reality, courage and vulnerability are deeply connected. You can't have one without the other. Courage is about showing up when you don't have all the answers, and vulnerability is about being willing to be seen in the middle of the uncertainty. The problem is both of these things feel risky. They push us to step outside our comfort zones, to take chances, to open ourselves up to the possibility of failure or rejection. And without something greater to guide us, it's easy to shrink back. That's where divine purpose changes everything. When our lives are guided by God, courage and vulnerability stop being random acts of bravery and start becoming intentional expressions of faith. It's no longer about proving ourselves. It's about aligning ourselves with something bigger than us. That shift matters because it gives both courage and vulnerability a deeper foundation. Instead of feeling like reckless risks, they become sacred acts of trust. Think about the moments in your life when you've had to be truly courageous. Maybe it was stepping into a new chapter you weren't prepared for, speaking up when it would have been easier to stay silent, or admitting a truth you had buried for too long. Those moments were never easy, and they likely came with fear and trembling. But when you knew deep down that you weren't stepping out alone, when you believed that God was guiding your steps, that courage became possible. You didn't have to muster it up from sheer willpower. It grew out of your faith that there was purpose in the risk. The same is true of vulnerability. It's one of the hardest things we'll ever do, to admit weakness, to show our wounds, to let others see the parts of us that aren't polished or perfect. The world tells us to hide those parts, to cover them up, to only present the strongest version of ourselves. But when our identity is grounded in God, vulnerability stops feeling like exposure and starts feeling like freedom. We realize we don't need to be flawless to be loved. We don't need to be perfect to be worthy. And when we live from that truth, our willingness to be vulnerable becomes a gift to others. It opens doors for connection, for empathy, for healing, not just for us, but for those who witness it. Divine purpose has a way of weaving courage and vulnerability together into something powerful. Courage gives us the strength to step forward, and vulnerability keeps us honest about who we are in the process. Guided by God, those two qualities grow deeper, stronger, more authentic. They stop being about us and start being about service, about love, about impact. And that's where their true power lies, not in making us look brave, but in helping us live in a way that reflects the heart of the one who gives us that purpose in the first place. There's a kind of exhaustion that comes from living out of alignment. It's the feeling you get when your values say one thing, but your actions keep moving in another direction. It's the tension of knowing what matters most to you deep down, yet finding yourself caught up in choices, habits, or routines that don't reflect it. We've all felt that disconnection at some point, the quiet tug of, this isn't who I want to be. And the longer we live in that gap, the heavier it feels. That's why putting God first matters so much. It closes the space between what we believe, what we do, and the difference we make in the world. When we start with God, our values aren't just nice words on paper or intentions we talk about when life slows down. They become alive, they become active, and they guide us in the decisions that shape our days. Suddenly, integrity isn't something we try to squeeze in. It becomes the natural outcome of aligning with something greater than ourselves. Patience, kindness, humility, and courage stop being lofty ideals and start being lived realities. We don't just say what we believe, we live it. And when our actions flow out of those values, the impact we create begins to match the person we're striving to become. The opposite is also true. When God isn't first, it's easy for the gap between values and actions to widen. We may say we value honesty but cut corners when it benefits us. We may say we value relationships but let business push people aside. We may say we value peace but spend our energy feeding the noise around us. Over time, that gap doesn't just cause stress, it erodes trust. Others sense it, and we sense it within ourselves. It leaves us questioning whether the life we're building is really the life we want. But when God leads, alignment begins to take shape. The choices we make are less about convenience and more about consistency. The work we do carries more weight because it reflects the values at our core. Even the smallest actions, a word of encouragement, a moment of honesty, a decision to forgive, gain significance because they aren't random, they're rooted in purpose. That's how impact grows, not from big flashy gestures, but from daily alignment between what we say we believe, what we actually do, and the way it touches others. And here's the thing, that kind of alignment brings a peace you can't manufacture. It's the peace of knowing that your inner life and outer life aren't at war with each other. It's the strength of walking into a room knowing you're not pretending, you're consistent. It's the quiet confidence of trusting that even when no one else sees, God does, and He honors that alignment. Putting God first doesn't just shape who we are on the inside, it ripples outward, leaving an impact on the people around us, reminding them through our lives that integrity, love, and faith aren't just ideas, they're realities we can live every single day.